Ah.
Sir,
Sir,
start
sir.
करिए.
So it's Chinese.
दीप ज्योति परम ज्योति, दीप ज्योति जनार्दना, दीप हरे तू हरे पाप, दीप ज्योति नमस्तुते, शुभं करतु कल्याणं, आरोग्यं सुख संपदं, द्वेष बुद्धि विनाशाय, आत्मज्योति नमस्तुते, आत्मज्योति प्रदीप्ताय, ब्रह्मज्योति नमस्तुते, ब्रह्मज्योति प्रदीप्ताय, गुरुज्योति नमस्तुते. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Thank you, Roji. Good afternoon to each one of you present today. Respected Chairperson, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, respected today's speaker, Chief Speaker, Professor Tapan, Vidiyasagar University, Medinapur, respected Dr. Surya Maharana sir, and my dear students and all the participants. Today is our third day. We are going to organize this webinar series on reappraisal of system and problems for the celebrating centenary year of Professor S.N.Dasgupta's History of Indian Philosophy. It is sponsored by the ICPR. I welcome all of you to this webinar series of the third day, the third session. Before start the session, I request Sri Francis Bala, Assistant Professor of Philosophy, to give a introduction of our guest.
A very good afternoon to all. At the outset, I would like to welcome all the guests, all the participants to the 4-day lecture series sponsored by ICPR New Delhi and organized by PG Department of Philosophy, Vikram Dev Autonomous College, Jaipur. Actually, we have two speakers today, Professor Tapan and Professor Surya Maharana. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Tapan. Professor Tapan is a professor in PG Department of Philosophy, Vidiyasagar University, Medinapur, West Bengal. Professor De has many areas of specialization in philosophy, particularly in advanced logic, phenomenology and existentialism, philosophy of language, contemporary Indian philosophy, and many more. Apart from his academic activities, he had the interest in different co-curricular activities like NSS. He has been take the position of NSS program coordinator, and he has also received West Bengal State NSS Award for the year 2013 and 14 in the Best University category. He also received Lifetime Achievement Awards on the occasion of World Youth Skill Day at India International Center, New Delhi, which is organized by National Institute of Cleanliness, Education and Research in 2016. Apart from this, his area of interest are practical ethics, professional ethics, cognitive science, Kant, Hegel, etc. And he has delivered more than 56 lectures in various international, national seminars and webinars. And he has also published more than 39 research journals in various reputed uh, journals. Many his papers are like role of animal ethics on biodiversity, a critical evaluation, in defense of euthanasia, a spiritual analysis, rehabilitation of anthropocentrism, a critical approach, and many more. So, uh, with this, uh, I most welcome Professor Day to this lecture series, and today he will speak on S.N.Dasgupta on Buddhism. So, on behalf of all the students and participants, I welcome Professor Tapan. Sir, once again, welcome to you. We have another eminent speaker for the today lecture, Professor Surya Maharana. It's my great privilege to welcome and introduce Professor Surya Maharana. Surya Maharana has been working at present as an assistant professor of philosophy in the Department of Philosophy, University of Allahabad, Prayagraj, since 2010. Earlier, he taught at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Birla Institute of Technology and Science, Piplani, Rajasthan. And besides teaching, he has very other specialization or area of interest, such as he's involved in many administrative responsibilities like OSD officer on special duty, and also he's guiding he's guiding many doctoral students for PhD. Apart from this, his area of research interest like are contemporary philosophy, which especially phenomenology and existentialism. Also, he has a special interest in Vedanta, especially in Advaita Vedanta of Shankara. And his area of interest in teaching include classical Indian philosophy, 19th and 20th century continental philosophy, modern Western philosophy, logic, symbolic logic, Western epistemology, comparative religion, ethics, and professional ethics. Professor Maharana today he will speak on the topic, the greatness of classical Indian philosophy. So, with this, I once again welcome Professor Maharana to this series. Sir, welcome once again to this department. Thank you. May I now invite Professor Ganesh Prasad Das to chair this session. Sir, please.
Thank you, Francis. Welcome one and all to the third day's proceedings of the All India Seminar. On observance of Indian Philosophy Day and incidentally, for observance of the centenary jubilee of S.N.Dasgupta and his monumental A History of Indian Philosophy in 5 volumes. ଆଜି ଗୋଟେ ବଡ଼ ଶୁଭ ଦିନ। ଜୟପୁର ଆକାଶ ଆଜି ମେଘାଚ୍ଛନ୍ନ, ସେଠି ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟ ନାହାନ୍ତି, କିନ୍ତୁ ବାଦଲ ଉପରେ ଦି ଜଣ ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟ ଆଜି ଉପସ୍ଥିତ। ମେଦିନାପୁରରୁ ତପନ କୁମାର ଏବଂ ଆହ୍ଲାବାଦରୁ ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟକାନ୍ତ। ଦି ଜଣ ସୂର୍ଯ୍ୟ, ସେମାନେ ତପ୍ତ ନୁହନ୍ତି, ସେମାନେ ଶାନ୍ତ। ତପନ କୁମାର ଯଦିବା ୱେଷ୍ଟ ବେଙ୍ଗଲର, I consider him to be 1/3 Odia, and after induction of Jhadeshwar Ghosh there as Professor of Philosophy, I consider him to have become 2/3 Odia.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
And Suryakanta, of course, comes from Berhampur, Orissa, and he is made in Orissa, meant for the whole of India. You will remember, friends, that on the first day we discussed S.N.Dasgupta's life and philosophy. That was a presentation by me, followed by Charubala Mahanti's presentation on Advaita conception of mind, where he tried to lambast the mystical flavor which lies in the interpretation of traditional Advaitins. Now on the second day, Professor Dilip Mahanta of Calcutta University, he presented a talk on Sri Aurobindo. If S.N.Dasgupta is one of the yogis of West Bengal, Sri Aurobindo is also a yogi par excellence of that state, meant for the whole world, of course. And it was followed by Lakshmikanta Padhi's presentation on mysticism. So in a way, you will find that all the 4 discussions over 2 days are somehow linked to one theme, and the broad theme that has been prescribed by BD College for the seminar is the traditions and problems of Indian philosophy. Now today, I understand that Professor Tapan will speak on Buddhism, right?
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, sir.
Let us see in what way he is explaining or giving an exposition of his theme and trying to make it relevant to the present day scenario. Of course, we find that S.N.Dasgupta has given a very fine exposition of Buddhism, direct from the Pali and practice sources. That is very authentic reading. And let us now find out how far we will be enlightened by Tapan Babu's presentation. Over to Dr. Tapan De.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Am I audible to you, sir?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. A
But
very good afternoon.
if the sound would be become louder, if it can be.
Sure. Is it okay?
The
Hello?
same thing, the same thing, of course.
Hello? Is it okay or not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now,
It is all right. Yes. Please go on.
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to all of you, especially Professor Ganesh Prasad Das. One sense, he is my mentor, teacher. He loves me very much. And I'm happy that at the time of my presentation, he chairs the session. This is very proud moment for me. The co-speaker, Professor Surya Maharana of Allahabad University, is also my friend. Lakshman, Bikramdev of Bikramdev College, the organizers, the other teachers, students, participants of this college and out of the college. I am very much thankful to the organizer for giving me the chance to share my little knowledge, little reading with you on Professor S.N.Dasgupta's Buddhism. You all know that Professor S.N.Dasgupta is famous for his Himalayan texts that he published in the title of History of Indian Philosophy in his own method. At the time of writing History of Indian Philosophy, he clearly mentioned the influence of Buddhist philosophy in the field of Indian thoughts, especially the thoughts of Dingnag played the key role in the development of Indian logic, particularly the Neo philosophy. Today, I am going to just deliver a small piece on Buddhism following Professor S.N.Dasgupta, dividing it in two parts. One is the mysticism of Buddhism. Mysticism of Buddhism, that is early Buddhism, where mysticism and metaphysics of Buddhism was explained clearly and distinctly. And in the second part, later Buddhism will be taken into account, where logic and epistemology was discussed. You know that mysticism, particularly in early Buddhism, is dealt with the concept of nirvana. What nirvana is, how can nirvana be attained, that is perfectness be attained. All these things are discussed in the early Buddhism. In the latter part, when Dingnag Dharmakirti appeared in the scene, a different kind of a development of Buddhism we can find. And in this development, we will find that the total Indian logic was influenced by the Buddhist thinkers. Take first the concept of mysticism in a very brief manner. As Professor Das, the chairperson of this session, has mentioned that S.N.Dasgupta wrote his Buddhism from Pali. That is the original work. I also very much grateful to Professor Dasgupta that in his books, particularly in Buddhism, I can get a flavor of the originality or the original thinking on Buddhism. It is said, we can start in this way, as Professor Dasgupta said that none of the pre-Buddhist religion of India may be said to have been able to formulate a code of ethics and religion that was universally and composedly valid for all. This remark of Professor Dasgupta must be taken into account, as he just mentioned the role of Buddhism for preparing and presenting the universal friendship, universal compensation that will be applicable for all. And he again claimed that none of the pre-Buddhist religion was able to articulate such type of universality in the field of ethics, code of conduct, etc. Again, Professor Dasgupta says, many scholars are of opinion that the Sankhya and the Yoga represent the earliest systematic speculation in India. It is also suggested that Buddhism drew much its inspiration from them. It may be that there is some truth in such a view, but the systematic system of Sankhya and Yoga treatise, as we have read them, had decidedly been written after Buddhism. Moreover, it is well known to every student of Hindu philosophy that a conflict with Buddhists has largely stimulated philosophic inquiry in most of the system of Hindu thought. A knowledge of Buddhism is therefore indispensable for the right understanding of the different systems in their natural relation and opposition to Buddhism. That is the importance of Buddhism, and we should not avoid this area. So friends, come to the point. After hearing the comments of Professor Dasgupta relating to Buddhism and pre-Buddhist area, where we could not find any kind of universal ethical code and etc. as observed by Professor S.N.Dasgupta. And he said that the main aim of a human being is to free themselves from the birth and death cycle. Again and again, we are forced to take birth and we are forced to receive death at the end of a life, not the life, but a life. So this is our main aim, to avoid this circle, to get free from the pain of birth and death. In early Buddhist philosophy, it is told that human being can get Buddhatva, like Buddha did, after following eightfold paths. So, what is the main cause of our bondage? What is the main cause of our sufferings? That is called desire. It is said that we are bound without and within by the entanglement of desire, and that the only way of loosening these is by the practice of right discipline, concentration, and wisdom. According to Buddhism, right discipline is sila. That means the D is insisting from the commission of all sinful deeds. This is the first prerequisite. So that is there in Buddhism we find a preparatory stage. Who will free himself or herself from the circle of birth and death? The person who prepares himself for the next stage by following the right path will be able to free himself or herself from the circle of birth and death. So, a person has to refrain himself from any kind of actions generated by bad desires. Concentration or samadhi is a more advanced effort. That means the advanced stage. And at first, we will have to separate good and bad desire. And then we will have to move to the next stage. And the main purpose of Buddhist philosophy is to present universal friendship, universal compassion, happiness in the happiness of all, and indifference to any kind of preferment, whether of himself, his friend, his enemy, or a neutral party. That is the important thing we have to follow. That was told by Professor Das, the relevance of Buddhism in present scenario. If we are able to root out all the misery in this way by establishing universal friendship, universal compassion, then we will be happy. And we will be able to avoid the pain of death and live cheerfully. And also we will be able to pass over to the idea that other beings should also fare similarly. So the person who steps into the process of freeing himself, he will remember that if he the self-restrained, if he allows himself to be affected by anger, he would weaken the self-restraint, which he has been carefully practicing. The 4 stages of gradual advancement is there, as observed by Professor Dasgupta. There are 4 stages of the advancement for a person to become a saint and at last to attain nirvana. In the 4th or the last stage, both happiness and misery vanishes. That is the irony. That is the real fact, that in the last stage, a person will not be able to enjoy happiness or unhappiness. Both will vanish. They both will vanish. And all the roots of attachment and antipathies are destroyed. With the mastery of this stage of concentration, there comes the final state of absolute extinction of the mind and of total cessation of all sorrows and sufferings. That is, the stage of nirvana will come into existence. And what is the swarupa or nature of nirvana is also an important question in Buddhist mysticism, that is in early Buddhism. There it is observed by Professor Dasgupta that the ultimate goal of all concentration and its highest perfection with the Buddha is absolute extinction. It is indeed very difficult to describe satisfactorily the ultimate mystical stage of Buddhistic nirvana. This is explained or stated by Professor Dasgupta that it is very much difficult to satisfy others, giving proper descriptions of nirvana. And as it is not possible to give the satisfactory discussion, that is why it is called mysticism. That is mystic situation. Nirvana is a mystic situation. Though he is explained in from his own point of view that this position states the state of deliverance from all sorrow and from all happiness. Yet, as the ultimate ideal of all our highest strivings and the goal of all our moral perfection and concentration, it was an ideal which was in the highest degree attractive to the Buddhists. Had it been conceived as pure and simple extinction of or annihilation, it could not have had the attraction for the Buddhists that it did. In many passages, it is actually described as blissful. In other passages, it is held to be like the extinction of a flame. So that is the difficulty of Buddhist position of nirvana to be explained in a clear and distinct way. S.N.Dasgupta observed this clearly. Again, following Professor Dasgupta, we can say that nirvana means the self, no doubt, but this self is entirely different from the self with which we are familiar in all our ordinary worldly concerns. The question of self surely arises here, and it is answered that it is a self, sure, but it is not such type of self with which we are familiar in all our ordinary worldly concerns. Why it is not the self with which we are concerning, as it is the extinction of all our sorrows and pleasures and all our worldly experiences as much as is nirvana. It is a state of absolute dissolution of all world possesses. Though a blissful state, there is no distinction here between the bliss and the enjoyer of the bliss. But still, it is just such a non-logical ultimate state that could stimulate the highest striving of the best men of India. To call it blissful is not to understand bliss is an ordinary way. For this mystical bliss is incomprehensible by the intellect. So there is a bliss, a special kind of bliss is there, which is not comprehensible by the intellect. Professor Dasgupta is offering in his book Yoga, Philosophy and its Relation with Indian System, offered so many states of Buddhist mysticism. So as it is not intelligible, it is said by Professor Dasgupta that for academic and philosophical discussions, the essenceless state of the vacuity of nirvana is absolutely different from the pure self of yoga, liberation. Yet, from the point of view of mystical experience, both are too deep and unfathomable for ordinary comprehension. Both, that is yoga and Buddhist philosophy, are transcendent, unworldly, and contentless in their nature, and the method of their realization are also largely similar. In Buddhist mysticism, Professor Dasgupta finds deep similarity with yoga system in connection with nirvana. That is also an important fact as pictured out by Professor Dasgupta. We know that tapos has the power of endurance of physical privation and troubles was an indispensable accessory of both the Buddhist and yoga philosophy. The gradual abandonment of desires until their ultimate extinction could be effected was essential both to yoga and to Buddhism. It is true that the Upanishads do not speak of the extinction of desires, but they certainly praise self-control as an indispensable disdeterminant. There is indeed the law of karma, which requires that every person reap the fruits of his actions, whether good or bad, and that if the life of the present birth is not sufficient for the experience of the sufferings or the joys which are put to his account in accordance with the measure of his vice or virtue, he will enjoy or suffer the fruits of his deeds in another birth. That is, the circle of birth and death is also articulated on the theory of karma in Upanishads also. The main aim of early Buddhism was to establish the principal virtues of universal friendship, universal compassion. But at the first stage, universal friendship and universal compassion was not there. Professor Dasgupta clearly pictured out the theme that the main aim of Buddhist philosophy was to establish love, Maitri, Karuna universally. But in early stage, we will find that the universality was not there. There, if we follow the tales which were told as Jataka's story, that in the early stage of Buddhism, the partial fulfillment of the universality was there. The tale of self-sacrifice from the motive of universal friendship are rare. If you take the story of Dodhichi, then you will find the fact. The other stories are also there to explain the matter clearly. If we take the story of King Sibi, who was tested by the gods Indra and Agni, Agni took the form of a pigeon and Indra that of a pursuing hawk. This pigeon took shelter with King Sibi. The latter would not give it over to the hawk because the pigeon had taken shelter with him. And under these circumstances, he would rather give up his own life than allow the pigeon to be killed. At last, the hawk said that he would be satisfied if King Sibi would give from his own body flesh of the same weight as that of the pigeon. And the king cut the flesh of his pig with his own sword. This, however, is a case of the Kshatriya's virtue of giving shelter to those who seek it, even at the sacrifice of one's own life. It does not exemplify self-sacrifice for the good of beings in general, out of pure motives of universal friendship. So in early Buddhism, the sacrifices are there, but they were not related with the universality for the well-being of all people. Rather, they were for the satisfaction of the particular ethics or religion. Religion means here dhammo, Kshatriya dhammo. Here, the King Sibi was maintaining his Kshatriya dhammo by not giving the pigeon to the hawk, and also by giving the flesh from his body to the hawk. But in another story, Professor Dasgupta here distinctly separated that this type of sacrifice is not presenting the universality, but later on, that means the second stage. Here, Professor Dasgupta distinctly separated between two grades of early Buddhism. He says that there are some Buddhist saints of lower order and some are higher orders. Arhats are called lower order saints. They are called so because they live alone and tries to attain perfect knowledge and nirvana by themselves. That is why they are called lower grade of Buddhists. What is presented here, please? On the other hand, the higher Buddhas are those who aim not only at the vision of truth for destroying their inner notion of self or ego and all desires of existence and non-existence, but also at doing good to all living beings and constantly practicing the great virtues. Their enlightenment includes not only the possession of the truth indispensable to salvation, but also omniscience, universal knowledge of all details of things, and omnipotence. So, here lies the transformation of ethical actions from particularity to universality. According to Professor Dasgupta, those who attains the power to be perfect Buddha not only thought his prolonged meditation by which he gets insight into the principles of all things, but also through his infinite merits of constantly performing the great virtues of charity, patience, etc. The man who aims at the attainment of this superior Buddhahood is called Bodhisattva. So, the concept of Bodhisattva, according to Professor Dasgupta, is related, deeply related with the concept of universality, of friendship, universality of compassion, etc. Again, Professor Dasgupta observed that he who is kind and good and has a great propensity for doing good to others, and who thought incapable of committing a sinful action for himself, may yet be so moved by love for his fellow beings as to commit a wrong action for them, is fit to take the vow of Bodhisattva, who would spend all his future career for the good of others. His enthusiasm is not for the egoistical claim of the saint who is anxious for his own deliverance. He is moved by the most altruistic of all motives, that is compassion for all creatures. So, in this part, mystic part or mysticism, Buddhist mysticism, we find that Professor Dasgupta observed a gradual process from early Buddhism to the next stage, that for the establishment of the universal friendship, karuna, etc., we find these concepts in later Buddhists. And also, Professor Dasgupta, in his book, History of Indian Philosophy, Volume 1, Chapter 5, offered a brief survey of the evolution of Buddhist thought. There, I shall show the next position of Buddhist philosophy in connection with logic and epistemology in Neo system. Dingnag is the key person in this case. You know, Professor Dasgupta clearly pictured out the thing, the importance of Buddhist philosophy in connection with the development of Indian systems of thought, where he said that there was a commentary on Maharshi Gautama's Nyaya Sutra, and this first commentary was critically or severely criticized by the Buddhist philosopher Dingnag. And this criticism of Dingnag influenced Udayana, who wrote another commentary on Vatsayan Bhashya. And again, Vachaspati Mishra wrote another commentary on the second commentary named Bhartiko Tatporja Tika to refute the objection raised by the Buddhists. Again, Udayana wrote another commentary named Nyaya Tatporja Tika Parishuddhi. In this way, we will find a series of writings offered by Nyaya philosophers to refute Dingnag. The philosophy of Dingnag is clearly explained and verified in his most important work, the Pramana Samuchchaya. In this book, he explained his epistemology, which holds two instruments of knowledge, perception or sensation, and inference or reasoning. For him, sensation and reasoning are the only two means of acquiring knowledge, because two attributes are knowable. There is no knowable object other than the peculiar and the general attribute. So, Dingnag offers criticism to the Nyaya Anumano, Nyaya system of Anumano, and he was criticized also by the later Noyaikos. Professor Dasgupta also showed the relation of Buddhist philosophy with the other field of Indian thoughts. One is Upanishads and Buddhism, where he showed the deep relation between these two. The Upanishads had discovered that the true self was Anand. We could suppose that early Buddhism tacitly presupposes some such idea. It was probably thought that if there was the self, it must be bliss. The Upanishads had asserted that the self was indestructible and eternal. If we are allowed to make explicit that was implicit in early Buddhism, we could conceive it as holding that if there was the self, it must be bliss because it was eternal. Upanishads believe in eternal self, but Buddhists do not believe in eternal self. That is the difference, but besides this, there is deep relation with Buddhism and Upanishadic philosopher. Before Buddha, the state of Indian philosophy was also explained by Professor Dasgupta, where the theory of Charvakos also explained. If we go through this chapter 5, we will find it. With these few words, I just want to stop myself Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Professor
you.
De. Thank you. Thank you, Professor De, for your nice exposition of early Buddhist philosophy, making reference to the philosophy of the Upanishads, philosophy of Charvaka, and others. Actually, your explanation is very much simple, and it is able to well outreach the students, and they must have been benefited very much by your lecture. And it is a fine tribute, I will say, to the holy memory of S.N.Dasgupta, because you were very much close to the 5th chapter of volume 1 of A History of Indian Philosophy, where he gives a full exposition of early Buddhism and later Buddhism too. So there is one question in the chat box. Let us take up that. That is a simple question and short question. And then we will wait for the students' answers, and then if time permits, we will discuss certain things. And the short question that is available in the chat box is whether Buddhism is pessimistic or optimistic.
Yes. Will the answer should be given by the participants, sir?
No, by you.
Oh,
Yes, ask me.
yeah. There is no chance for pessimism. Buddhist philosophy is purely optimistic philosophy, because after explaining the causes of sorrow, the birth and death cycle, it shows the right path to escape this cycle. That is, optimistic attitude is explained by the Buddhist philosophers and Buddhadev himself also, that we can get rid of this problem. We can possess our hope to come out of this problem. That is the optimistic attitude, I think so.
Now there are two things which will lead a common man to say that Buddha is very much pessimistic. Number one is he begins his philosophy by saying that the world is full of sorrow.
Yes.
And number two, he himself left samsara with wife and child alone in the palace.
Yes.
Was it just only part of Buddha?
But sir, Buddhadev realized after 6 years of his sacrifice that it is not the right path, and then he began to behave like common man by getting food for his health. And he clearly said, according to Professor Dasgupta, that without the healthy mind and healthy body, no one can think over to come out of this circle. That is the optimism, I think. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Actually, in history of philosophies, a general remark is that Indian philosophical systems are initially pessimistic, but ultimately they are optimistic.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Because if we follow Russell's precise words, life is not full of sorrow, life is not full of happiness. It's a mixture of sorrow and happiness.
Yes, sir. Right, sir. Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So, Lakhana, is there any other questions in chat box and or being asked by students?
Sir, there is a question. Is Buddhism a philosophy or a religion?
Achha. Very good question.
Very good question. Is Buddhism a philosophy or a religion? I think if you take it as a religion to be followed by you from the core of your heart with the core values which are there in Buddhism, then you can take it as a religion, as a path of mukti in Bengali it is called, that is path to free yourself from the cycle of birth and death. But at the same time, it is a rich philosophy, because there is a scope to exercise your intellect power by applying logic in the field of epistemology to get knowledge, how to free yourself through knowledge also. That there is philosophical exercise is also there. It is a philosophy from one side, and if you take it as a religion, then it will be a religion from the other side. It is up to you who will take it. Is up to this person who will take it. Okay.
But it will be more of philosophy rather than of religion, because there is no puja, there is no parikrama, no dakshina, no yajna, nothing of the sort, as we find usually in case of religions.
Yeah. If it is, if you think it as that means the puja and the other things that we call rituals. In this way, it is not religion. But if you think that you have to reach to the ultimate goal by sacrificing your desires and something, and for these reasons you have to do some special ethical code to follow the ethical codes, that is a humanistic religion in one sense, you can say, sir. I think
we can take Buddhism not exactly as a religion,
yes,
but like a religion, as we write.
yes, yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the term, sir. Thank you for the term.
Your student and your studently, like that. The religion like.
Religion like, yes.
But if you go to Bodh Gaya nowadays, you will find that Bhog is being given to Buddha there. in the form of chocolates.
they transform. They want to transform it forcefully as religion rather than philosophy.
Yes. Any other questions, Lakshmana?
Sir, no question in the chat box.
I'll
ask a question, Professor.
Sir, as you mentioned in your lecture that mysticism of Buddhism is quite similar with the yoga philosophy. We know that in yoga philosophy there is a union between self and the individual self and the universal self. But Buddhism always denies the existence of self.
Yes.
Then how could you relate this with the mysticism of yoga? Is quite like.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for this question. Actually, Professor Dasgupta observed in his another book, that is Yoga Philosophy and its relation with other Indian system, Hindu, where he stated in Hindu mysticism that there is some kind of a relation from mystical point of view, not from philosophical point of view. Mind it, from mystical point of view between Buddhism and yoga philosophy. What is the point? What is the point of their similarity? The point of their similarity is to the inexplicability of the reality, real situation, that is absolute reality. That means nirvana is inexplicable, as well as the samadhi, absolute samadhi, is also inexplicable. In this way, in this mystic way, they are similar. But in philosophical point of view, there is a great difference between the two systems. Okay.
Thank you.
I would go Chintila Prakara.
Sir, could I ask a question?
Yes,
sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar, Professor De. I have a question to ask. There had been a discussion regarding mysticism. Has it got to do something which is incomprehensible? Does it, or it has a broader connotation? What exactly is mysticism?
If you repeat again, then it will be good for me. Please repeat again your question.
Okay, sir. Sir, mysticism, does it have got to do with something which is incomprehensible, or has it got some broader connotation? What exactly is mysticism?
Oh, okay. Yes, right. You are. it is not only associated with inexplicability, it has a broad aspect, broad connotation also. What is mysticism? Not only inexplicability, but also something which is attainable by a person, but who attains it, who will attain it, will not be able to reach it to others exactly. Though Buddha, after Nirvana, was there and he was preaching his thoughts to his followers, but mysticism does not mean only the inexplicability. It has a broad aspects, and these aspects includes inexplicability and at the same time non-reachability of any persons. It should be reachable only by those who prepare themselves for this by crossing stage after stage and processes in this way. Okay.
Let me supplement it. Actually, there is Upanishadic mysticism and there is Buddhist mysticism, but the two sorts are quite different as far as I understand it. Let us take the example of soul. The Buddhist conception of soul is not the Charvak conception of soul. It is not the Upanishadic conception of soul. The Charvak will say there is no soul at all. Deha is the soul. Deha eva atma. So the Buddha will not say that Deha eva atma. But the Upanishads will say in contrast that there is a soul substance. Buddha will not say that soul is substance. So it is something via media. Soul is a set of sanskaras. The set ever renewing every moment. So that is it. So it is not Charvaka's view. It is not Upanishadic view. What it is, you will have to ponder over it. Indication is that it is not a substance. It is not nothing. It is a set of sanskaras only. Similar is the case with transmigration. There is afterlife, but no transmigration of soul. Charvak will say there is no afterlife. Upanishads will say there is afterlife with transmigration of soul. But the Buddha will say there is. It is not that there is no afterlife. It is not that afterlife is there with the transmigration of soul, but it is something in between. This is the sort of mysticism which we have in Buddhism. But in the Upanishads, there is a different kind of mysticism. There is soul in the form of substance. But what is that? Tat ejati, tat na ejati, tat avantike, tat dure. So that is far, that is near, that is here, that is there, that is in me, that is in others. So in this way, whatever you say of that soul, that will hold. So this sort of understanding that the Upanishads will impart is a sort of mystical understanding, and this sort of understanding that the Buddhists will impart is another sort of mystical understanding. So there is a difference between the two in this way, I think.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And then Tapan, there is another difficulty in Buddhism, the rule of causality.
Yes.
Buddha will say that the world is full of dukkha. Everything that happens has a cause. So dukkha has also a cause. And if you eliminate the cause, you will eliminate the effect.
Yes.
And his initial inquiry was, what being, what else is?
Yes.
What not being, what else is not?
Yes.
If we take this format, then draw a table like C implies E, we will have the truth table. Under the truth table of C implies E, Under C we will have 1100, and under E we will have 1010. So the first row 11, this being that comes to be all right. But 10 will not be all right. This being that does not come to be, it will not be all right. Yes. Then the third one, 01, will not be acceptable by Buddha. Perhaps that is the gap. Perhaps that is the point of tension that Buddhism will create in respect of its theory of causality.
Yes, sir. Yes.
0. This might be there, but then other thing might be there. The karana of dukkha, my present desire, is not there, but dukkha is there.
Dukkha is
Because
there.
dukkha is coming from my previous account.
Yes.
I will have to draw. But that
Yes.
Buddhism will not admit, perhaps. Therefore, 10 will not be acceptable for them. 01, I mean, 01 is not
01,
acceptable.
01, sir. 01, 01.
0 not acceptable.
From 0, we cannot get 1. Yes, sir.
Yes. But that will be acceptable by Upanishads and other Vedantin.
Yes.
That is the trouble. And the causal chain, and another thing, ancillary point, the causal chain is said to be very much novel to Buddhism, but it is not that. Because in the Brodharana Upanishad, we find these three things. Sa jatha kamo bhavanti, tat kratur bhavanti. Whatever one desires, so does he betake himself to. Then number 2, jat kratur bhavati, tat karma kurute. Whatever betakes himself to so he does the work. Then third one, jat karma kurute, tat abhisampadhyate. As you do the work, so he reaps the result. So this sort of chain is already there in the Upanishadic philosophy. If Buddha adds something, he adds a little bit difficult to it, I think. What is your view?
Take. Yeah, right you are, sir. Right you are. But it is not purely novel, but as the type of articulation, of Buddha is a novel one, sir.
And moreover, he was self-learned. He did not have any guru. He was not satisfied with any guru after all.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Lakshman, any other thing?
Sir,
Sir, namaskar, sir. Sir, namaskar, Ganesh, sir, namaskar, Professor Ganesh, sir, namaskar, sir. Tapan, sir, namaskar, sir.
Namaskar.
Sir, very nicely, Professor Das, actually, really enlightening, Malab, the way, by putting the truth table in and showing the problem in Buddhism, very nicely, we could see that out of nothing, there is no cause, but still the effect is there. That is a problematic with Buddhism. Okay, this is not there, but that arises. There is a problem in the third row. Even in the second row, because Buddhists believe in the theory of momentariness, and that being something being there, and everything is momentary, and that is not turning into anything. So that is again problematic, sir. Sir, how to see
Second
this?
row will not be accepted by anybody. Second row is not accepted by anybody.
Sir, one thing, but I have a doubt.
That is cause but no effect. It will not be accepted by anybody.
Yeah.
But when the Buddhists go with the doctrine of momentariness, everything is changing every moment. So how can the effect be not there when there is a cause? Because the Buddhists will say every moment the things are changing. So that's the problematic. That's the problem I have in mind.
Because the sanskara is carried away, but the sanskara appeals to sanskara. But then that is a sort of mysticism that we find in Buddhism.
Sir. Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for this Chatushpurti, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Namaskar, sir. Namaskar.
Any other question, Lakshman?
there is also two questions in the chat box.
Please.
Do Buddhists believe in God or gods?
Do Buddhists believe in God or gods? You know, actually, they do not believe in any kind of God. They believe in Arhat or the Bodhisattva. That means the Nirvana, who attained Nirvana. There is no role of Ishvara in Buddhist philosophy. The path is showed by Buddha to be followed by a person himself, not with the help of any God. Okay.
But at present, if you go to any Buddhist shrine, you will find that Buddha himself has become God, and he receives arati, bhoga, etc., etc., etc.
Sir, but it is not the implications of Buddhism which
Right,
was
right.
teach
Yes,
by Buddha,
yes,
sir.
you are right. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Another question, Lakshmana?
Sir, another question what is according to Buddhism, everything is impermanent. So how can the state of enlightenment be permanent?
Who said that a state of enlightenment is permanent? It is going on and going on and going on. Transformation, transformation, and transformation. Okay. There is no permanency in Buddhism, in our life also. We are also here, not in a permanent position. We are also in a temporary position, and each and every moment it is transforming. Sir, is it right, sir?
Right, yes. Lakshmana,
another question is, what is ethics according to Buddhism? He has already told it.
What is ethics? Yes, it is. Ethics is to act desirelessly for universal friendship, universal compensation. That means you have to place yourself for universal ethics, universal friendship. That is the ethics. That means please give up which is negative, which is not fruitful for your purpose, and follow the path to fulfill your purpose to be a bodhisattva. That is the ethics. And we have to follow, if we want to follow, according to Buddhism, the Eightfold Path. That is the ethics. Okay.
Tapan,
Sir?
There is a glitch over here.
Oh.
Upanishadic ethics is supported by Upanishadic metaphysics.
Yes.
Or better, Upanishadic ontology.
Yes, sir.
But here, Buddhist ethics is seen not to be supported by his ontology. That one is permanent, that everything is changing every Monday, etc., etc. Does it support his ethical advices or ethical principles? So, without talking about his ontology, if we talk about Buddhist ethics, will it be all right?
Sir, there is a problem, sir. There is a problem, sir. But it will take, sir, 1 hour to discuss.
Yes. So it is food for thought, for later thought.
Yeah,
so at present, let us pay our gratefulness to Professor Tapan for rising. Sun is rising, for rising and shining at BD College Jaipur, giving us so many good things about early Buddhism, in comparing it to the philosophies of Charvaka, Nyaya, and the Upanishads. So thank you very much, and we are very much indebted to you. We will wish that whenever we will need you, because you are 2/3 Odia now.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure, sir. It's my pleasure.
You will leave your work belonging to the other 1/3 and come over here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You, sir, you particularly, you are our extended faculty, sir, for the Department of Philosophy. Thank you, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now go further north. We now go further north to Allahabad to see our second son, Dr. Suryakant Maharana, who will now speak on classical Indian philosophy. I am very happy that he is good at both classical Indian philosophy as well as Western philosophy, and this is the occasion to commemorate the centenary celebration of S.N.Dasgupta's A History of Philosophy in 5 volumes. And in continuation of the discussion, I would now request Professor Maharana to speak on classical Indian philosophy. The topic that he has chosen will interest us and we will be benefited very much by it. Over to Professor Maharana. Professor Maharana Suryakanti ji.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah, Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah, Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Honorable Chairperson of the National Seminar, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, my revered teacher, my co-presenter, Professor Tapan Kumar De, all my esteemed colleagues who are present on this platform, the organizers, Lakshman and Barla, my dear beloved students of Vikram Dev College. It's a great pleasure and opportunity for me once again to be present in front of you all. And the topic that has been chosen by me in commemoration of Professor S.N.Dasgupta, his epoch-making volume, A History of Indian Philosophy. Time was very short. I was told about this topic hardly 6 to 7 days ago, and I took at least 3 days of time to choose the title itself. And within the last 3 to 4 days, I had to prepare the paper, and I am not sure about the content of the paper because I have done it very hurriedly. Could not consult many of the important sources, but then I have tried my level best to present under the title, The Greatness of Classical Indian Philosophy. The title that I have chosen today, while remembering Professor S.N.Dasgupta, is The Greatness of Classical Indian Philosophy. The title itself is the answer for the question that I have raised here. The problem that I have raised in this paper in the form of the question is that what prompted the authors of Indian philosophy in general to write about Indian philosophy? What prompted the authors of classical Indian philosophy in general to write about classical Indian philosophy itself? And as an answer, as a solution to this problem, I got the title. That is, it is due to the greatness of classical Indian philosophy itself that all the great authors of classical Indian philosophy have written about classical Indian philosophy itself. Now the question is, What is greatness? What do we understand greatness, or greatness lies in what? The answer that I have tried to give here is the greatness of classical Indian philosophy lies in its spiritual heritage. The spiritual heritage, and its spiritual heritage was a wonder during the ancient days. The wonder that was India, as Professor A.L. Basham would call it. So, the spiritual heritage of India consists in the search for eternal truths or reality, and its vision and attainment. This can be put technically as Atma Sakshatakara, just to see the self, to meet the self face to face. Such heritage is the outcome of serious philosophical engagement and reflection and practical activities undertaken by the rishis or philosophers of ancient fame. The spiritual heritage, however, was grounded on rationality. This is in brief the answer that I have given to the question that greatness lies in what? Certainly, India is great. We are born and brought up in India, and we feel that our India is great. And therefore, its philosophy is also great. But then we have to justify this position of ours by putting philosophical arguments and philosophical proofs, evidences in its support. So what I have done in this paper is to prove the greatness of classical Indian philosophy and the love and affection that the philosophers of India have towards classical Indian philosophy, and because of which they have written volumes of works, voluminous works on classical Indian philosophy. I will simply note down their words, on the basis of which we can say, or I can claim, that it is because of these reasons, because of this spirituality or the spiritual heritage of Indian culture, Indian philosophy, they have aroused a kind of commitment and love and affection, motivation and devotion towards classical Indian philosophy, and then they have started writing their volumes and volumes of books. I have chosen few philosophers and their quotations, because of which I feel that classical Indian philosophy was great for them, and greatness lies in that, because of which they wanted to work for classical Indian philosophy, not only for the benefit of people of India, but people of the whole world. The first and foremost philosopher that I've chosen to prove the greatness is Professor S.N.Dasgupta himself. And the book that I've chosen is A History of Indian Philosophy. I would like to quote Professor S.N.Dasgupta, wherein he says, the old civilization of India was a concrete unity of many-sided developments in art, architecture, literature, religion, morals, and science so far as it was understood in those days. But the most important achievement of Indian thought was philosophy. It was regarded as the goal of all the highest practical and theoretical activities, and it indicated the point of unity amidst all the apparent diversities, which the complex growth of culture over a vast area inhabited by different peoples produced. It is not in the history of foreign invasions, in the rise of independent kingdoms at different times, in the,
No audio.
am I audible, sir?
Now you are audible.
Okay, sorry. Okay, let me continue. It is essentially one of the yeah. It is essentially one of the spiritual aspirations and obedience to the law of the spirit, which were regarded as superior to everything else, and it has outlived all the political changes through which India passed. The Greeks, the Huns, the Scythians, the Pathans, and the Mughals, who occupied the land and controlled the political machinery, never ruled the minds of the people. For these political events were like hurricanes or the changes of season, mere phenomena of a natural or physical order which never affected the spiritual integrity of Hindu culture. If after a passivity of some centuries, India is again going to become creative, it is mainly on account of this fundamental unity of her progress and civilization, and not for anything that she may borrow from other countries. It is therefore indispensably necessary for all those who wish to appreciate the significance and potentialities of Indian culture that they should properly understand the history of Indian philosophical thought, which is the nucleus round which all that is best and highest in India has grown. I unquote. Again, I would like to quote a small paragraph of Professor S.N.Dasgupta, which again proves the greatness of classical Indian philosophy. But it is not only for the sake of the right understanding of India that Indian philosophy should be read, or only as a record of the past thoughts of India. For most of the problems that are still debated in modern philosophical thought occurred in more or less divergent forms to the philosophers of India. Their discussions, difficulties, and solutions, when properly grasped in connection with the problems of our times, may throw light on the course of the process of the future reconstruction of modern thought. The discovery of the important features of Indian philosophical thought and a due appreciation of their full significance may turn out to be as important to modern philosophy as the discovery of Sanskrit has been to the investigation of modern philological researches. It is unfortunate that the task of reinterpretation and revaluation of Indian thought has not yet been undertaken on a comprehensive scale. This is what the heart of Professor S.N.Dasgupta says about the greatness of classical Indian philosophy. And that is the reason perhaps why he has written volumes and volumes of ideas presented by him in his books of classical Indian philosophy. The next philosopher that I have taken up, in fact, two philosophers, D.M. Datta and S.C. Chatterjee. And the name of the book is, title of the book is An Introduction to Indian Philosophy. This is another basic book which we have gone through during our graduation as well as in post-graduation. I would like to quote from S.C. Datta, S.C. Chatterjee and D.M. Datta, wherein they say, while an attempt has been made to bring out the significance of Indian views in terms of modern Western thought, care has always been exercised to preserve their distinctive marks, such as their spiritual and practical outlook, their recognition of the different levels of experience. So, what is being noted here by these two wonderful authors is the spiritual and practical outlook which only Indian philosophy, classical Indian philosophy possesses. That has the germ of inspiration for both these writers to start off their writing on classical Indian philosophy. This book has been much popular worldwide and has been translated in so many languages. The next popular philosopher that I have taken up is Professor Chandradhar Sharma. It is a very proud moment for me to take the name of Professor Chandradhar Sharma because he happened to be a great alumnus of the Department of Philosophy, University of Allahabad, wherein I am working right now. A critical survey of Indian philosophy, very famous work worldwide. Let me quote Professor Sharma from the critical survey. One line quotation that I've chosen from him is, I shall feel amply rewarded if it arouses a genuine interest in Indian philosophy. I unquote. What does he say? He says, I repeat, I shall feel amply rewarded if it arouses a genuine interest in Indian philosophy. Now the question which may come suddenly to our mind is, why you shall feel rewarded? If this question is asked to C.D. Sharma, then he might answer in this way, which I have tried to answer from my own behalf. For me, the answer lies in the fact that Dr. C.D. Sharma, Chandradhar Sharma, a great alumnus of the University of Allahabad, has remained a great fan of classical Indian philosophy, especially Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta in particular. This is evident from the very title of his PhD thesis, Dialectic in Buddhism and Vedanta, which was awarded to him from the University of Allahabad. Not only he did PhD from the University of Allahabad, but also he did DILIT from the same department, same university. And the title of his DILIT was The Reign of Dialectic in Philosophy, Indian and Western. Besides, his great admiration of Vedanta is further strengthened by the fact that he made a vehement criticism of the criticism came from Vijnanavadins and Shunyavadins on Acharya Gaudapada, that Acharya Gaudapada was a crypto Buddhist or Prachanna Buddha. Strongly reacting on such criticism, Dr. Sharma reverses this criticism and states against the Buddhist that, again I quote Professor Chandradhar Sharma, if one is really fond of this Prachanna Buddha or Prachanna terminology, then instead of dubbing Gaudapada as Prachanna Buddha, it will be far more appropriate for one to dub the Shunyavadins and Vijnanavadins as Prachanna Vedantins. The Vijnanavadins and Shunyavadins should be Prachanna Vedantins instead of Gaudapada being called as a Prachanna Buddha. Besides the above, admiration for Indian philosophy, he also draws inspiration from so many eminent scholars of India. First and foremost among them is Professor S.N.Dasgupta. Next, Professor M. Hiryana, and then Dr. S. Radhakrishnan. Next, Professor A.C. Mukherjee. Again, I am proud to take the name of Professor A.C. Mukherjee, who happened to be a former professor, a great philosopher of India, of my department, my home department, that is Department of Philosophy, University of Allahabad. Professor R.D. Ranade. Again, I am very proud to say that Professor Ranade was the first head of the Department of Philosophy in the University of Allahabad. S.D. Bhattacharya, and finally Dr. Amarnath Jha. Again, I am proud to say that Dr. Amarnath Jha was the former head and vice chancellor of the University of Allahabad and head of the Department of Sanskrit in University of Allahabad. So this is what is the glory and greatness of classical Indian philosophy that is noted here, recorded here by Professor Chandradhar Sharma. Next philosopher that I have taken up is Professor M. Hiryana. All the credits of his work, that is Outlines of Indian Philosophy, has given by him to Professor S. Radhakrishnan. It is S. Radhakrishnan who inspired Professor Hiryana to work on the outlines of Indian philosophy. The next philosopher that I've taken up is a renowned one, Professor K. Sachidananda Murthy. Professor K. Sachidananda Murthy's very popular book, Philosophy in India. His admiration and deep interest of Indian philosophy can be inferred from the two lovely quotations quoted by him in the very beginning of his book. I would like to quote. The first quotation is, "This is the supreme duty, namely to have a vision of the self through yoga." I unquote. This he has taken from Yajnavalkya Smriti 1.8. The second beautiful quotation is, "Philosophical discipline leads man to develop ultimately a vision of self-similarity and even one of self-identity." This he has taken from Sukhlalji, Indian Philosophy, page 110. All right. Another quotation okay. He says that there are many Western and a few Indian intellectuals who believe that Indian philosophy is not philosophy at all, but a collection of dogmas, mystifying and unproductive statements, and astonishing and false factual beliefs. If one, this he has said while referring to Anthony Flew for his book, An Introduction to Western Philosophy, published in London in 1971. And then also referring to A.C. Dento, title of the book is Mysticism and Morality, published by Penguin from 1972. He continues, if one holds such a view, philosophy should mean only Western philosophy, and Indian philosophy should be excluded from our departments of philosophy. As Buddhist philosophy, Chinese philosophy, and Shintoism are from the departments of philosophy in Japan. A number of Western thinkers and the majority of Indians do not subscribe to this view. In fact, the above view ignores a number of facts. First, Western philosophy also is inseparable from religion, even when it combats the latter. The Bible and the biblical religion are, Rode calls us first, a foundation of our philosophy, and it was Platonic theories and Christian intuitions which Anne Whitehead pointed out. Furnished the intellectual justification for Western moral ideas and sociological concepts. There is no need to lamentation if a philosophy is mystical, for only mysticism can approach as it were experimentally the problem of the existence and nature of a transcendental principle. This idea he has taken from Henry Bergson, and then again starts saying that philosophy, Anne Whitehead declared, is mystical. For mysticism is a direct insight into depths as yet unspoken. Now, this is the reference that K. Sachidananda would like to give in favor of his view that even though Indian philosophy is leveled with mysticism, there is nothing to lament. So therefore, all these statements of Professor Sachidananda Murthy leads towards the greatness of classical Indian philosophers. The next philosopher that I've chosen is a recent one, Professor Jonardhan Ganeri, who is a professor of philosophy University of Sussex, United Kingdom. And the book, which is titled is Philosophy in Classical India. Ganesh, being a great fan of classical Indian philosophy, is reluctant to accept the view that Indian philosophy is something other. Indian philosophy is something other, quote unquote, than rational. I quote Ganesh. Ganesh says, philosophy in classical India focuses on the concept of rationality in Indian philosophical theory. The story of reason in a land too often defined as reason's other. Ganesh asks, what are the philosophical projects of a number of major Indian philosophers, and what are the methods of rational inquiry used in pursuit of those projects? In so doing, he illuminates a network of mutual reference and criticism, influence and response, in which reason is simultaneously used constructively and to call itself into question. This fresh perspective on classical Indian thought unravels new philosophical paradigms and points towards new applications for the concept of reason. Just before we had discussed Professor Sachidananda-Murthy's views regarding the mystical elements in Indian philosophy, favoring the mystical elements in Indian philosophy. Just to reverse, just opposite to this, Jonathan Gunnery says, no, there is no place of mysticism in Indian philosophy at all. Reason is the guide for all classical Indian philosophers. It is not other than rationalism. Rather, it is founded on rationality. So this is what is the greatness, again, proved by Jonathan Gunnery in favor of classical Indian thought. The next philosopher that I've taken up is Professor P.T. Razu, worked in College of Wooster, Ohio, United States of America. The book that I have taken up for him is The Philosophical Traditions of India. The Philosophical Traditions of India is a great book by itself. Being a greatest defender of Indian philosophy, P.T. Razu writes, I quote, the book attempts to overcome many of the difficulties which Western students encounter in studying Indian philosophy, and also to remove many misunderstandings about it, such as that it is all pure mysticism without logic, that it is based on that it is based upon some supernatural intuition, that it is only or mainly the philosophy of the worship of Shakti or Mother Goddess in the form of sexual energy, and that it has no academic side. The book tries to convey within the scope of an elementary work, which it is, that Indian philosophy has a intricate and complex metaphysical and epistemological theories as many others, and that in fact these disciplines, epistemology and metaphysics, are an essential and necessary part of Indian philosophy, as they ought to be of any philosophy that claims to be a philosophy of life. And this claim of philosophy ought constantly to be kept before our minds. For if philosophy gives up the task of being a philosopher of life, there is no other subject to undertake the task. Hegel's view that a culture without philosophy, by which he means metaphysics, is like a temple without the holy of the holies, applies well to Indian philosophy, which is the holy of the holies of India's culture and way of life. We may also remember George Santayana's observation that there were only two metaphysical nations, the Greeks and the Indians. Metaphysics, with all that it implies, particularly logic and epistemology, was a gift of nature to the Greeks and the Indians and points to the holy of the holies, however defined or described. This is K. Sachidananda Murthy. Now, in this context, let me bring in Professor S. Radhakrishnan, the former President of India and a global philosopher, expressing his dissatisfaction over some Western attitudes on Indian philosophy. Professor Radhakrishnan wrote, there is hardly any height of spiritual insight or rational philosophy attained in the world that has not its parallel in the vast stretch that lies between the early Vedic seers and the modern Nayayikas. This is what Professor Radhakrishnan has said about the reaction of the Western attitude towards Indian philosophy. If Indian philosophy was hurt, Radhakrishnan couldn't tolerate it. And this proves that he was a very soft corner for classical Indian philosophy, because of which he had written so many books on classical Indian philosophy and its other aspects. P.T. Raju continues, attempting to put Indian philosophy at par with its Western counterpart. That is, P.T. Raju always attempted to put Indian philosophy at par with its Western counterpart. He writes, Whitehead said, the Western philosophy is a series of footnotes to Plato. Raju says that we may add that all post-Kantian philosophy up to the present is a series of footnotes to Kant. After this, P.T. Raju includes, similarly, Indian philosophy can also be considered to be a series of footnotes to the Upanishads. This itself reveals how deeply Professor P.T. Raju loves classical Indian philosophy. His love and passion for Indian philosophy was so much that he appeals it will give me satisfaction if this small book can give a clear idea of basic doctrines of the Indian philosophical traditions to the Western beginner without misleading him, and to the Indian student without confining and limiting him to the traditional conceptual schemata of understanding. I unquote. So this was what P.T. Raju said about the greatness of classical Indian philosophy, and because of which he had to write this magnum opus called Philosophical Tradition, the Philosophical Traditions of India. Besides this, we find that most of the contemporary Indian philosophers, such as Sri Aurobindo, yesterday we had a elaborate discussion on Sri Aurobindo's Advaitism, integral non-dualism. Swami Vivekananda, Ravindranath Tagore, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, Krishna Chandra Bhattacharya, and many others who were Advaitins of some sort by heart. There is no doubt about this. And throughout their philosophies, they have tried to establish non-dualistic philosophy in some way or other. All of them agreed on one single point, that is, to rank Indian philosophy not less than its Western counterpart. And this is evident from their works, which all of us know and we have read thoroughly time and again during our education, graduation, post-graduation, and higher studies. However, any discussion on Indian philosophy is incomplete without the mention of a path-breaking philosopher of India, Professor J.N. Mohanty, Jitendranath Mohanty, professor at Temple University, United States of America, a great follower of Advaita Vedanta by heart. From the beginning of his career, Professor J.N. Mohanty was a great admirer of Advaita Vedanta. The book that I have taken of him is Explorations in Indian Philosophy. In Explorations of Indian Philosophy, I would like to quote some words of the great professor, how he was so much inspired by Indian philosophy, which prompted him to write on Indian philosophy. During these years, I quote, during these years, he studied Advaita Vedanta with Nalinikanta Brahma. It was during his graduate studies in Calcutta that he came to know the study of Vedanta with the late Yogendranatha Tarka Vedanta Tirtha, whose scholarship overwhelmed him and whose teachings of Advaita Vedanta were so powerfully impressed upon him that even to this day, after more than about 50 years, they remain indelibly clear in his mind. He received his MA from Calcutta University in 1914. Out of the university, he was introduced to another great teacher in Indian philosophy, the Nayayika, the late Pandita Ananta Kumara Tarkatirtha, who not only taught him Navyanaya, but impressed upon him the logical foundation of all Indian philosophers. He studied with this Nyaya Pandita from 1950 to 1962, except for the period from 1952 to 54, during which he was in Germany working on his doctorate in philosophy, which he earned in 1954. This was the foundation of Professor J.N. Mohanty, and wherefrom he had to start a long career in the Western countries, particularly in Germany and the United States of America. Besides Indian philosophy, the special contribution of Professor Mohanty lies in comparing Indian philosophical concepts with the Western ones, especially Buddhist and Vedantic concepts such as pure consciousness, with that of Edmund Husserl and Franz Brentano. Jain Mohanty's devotion and commitment and a soft corner for classical Indian philosophy produced the following epoch-making literature. The first one that he has written was Classical Indian Philosophy, published by Lehman Publishers from Maryland. The second masterpiece was Ganges's Theory of Truth. And then SS for Kalidas Bhattacharya, etc. And besides this, so many other books and research papers on continental philosophy and Western philosophy at large. So this was Jain Mohanty. The last philosopher that I have taken up is Professor B.K. Matilal, Bimal Krishna Matilal. Like Professor Jain Mohanty, Bimal Krishna Matilal, who hails from the University of Oxford, United Kingdom, wished to show the relevancy and the contribution of Indian philosophical tradition to the West. He strongly believed that Indian philosophy is concerned with the same issues and themes as have been discussed in the Western philosophy. The book that I have taken up today for discussion is Logic, Language and Reality. His love of Indian philosophy has given rise to the following splendid works. The first one is Epistemology, Logic and Grammar in Indian Philosophical Analysis, published in 1971. The second one is Perception, an essay on classical Indian theories of knowledge, 1985. Logical and Ethical Issues, an essay on the Indian philosophy of religion, 1982. Navya Navya Doctrine of Negation, 1968. And finally, The Word and the World, India's Contribution to the Study of Language, published in 1990. Besides this, he has also published certain other books centering around Indian classical text, such as Moral Dilemmas in the Mahabharata, published in 1989, The Logical Illumination of Indian Mysticism, published from Oxford in 1977, and finally, Nyaya Siddhanta Deepa, published from India, Ahmedabad, in 1976. So these are the great philosophers whom I have taken, but much more other philosophers were also there, but then due to the paucity of time, I couldn't consult them. Now let me move towards the conclusion of my presentation today. In the conclusion, I would say that having made these observations of the greatness of classical Indian philosophy pointed out by these great philosophers from India and abroad, let me give my own observations about why Indian philosophy, classical Indian, should be a great one, or where lies the greatness of classical Indian philosophy. The first point that I would like to bring before you is that the great scriptures, the foundation of classical Indian text, that is the Veda, is itself a life-saving scripture. it can save the life of a human being. This I can claim from the life of the great Mimamsaka, Kumarila Bhatta. All of us know the great hero, Kumarila Bhatta, the Bhatta school of Mimamsa. Kumarila Bhatta, once upon a time, wanted to learn Buddhism. All my esteemed colleagues, my teachers, they know about the story of Kumarila Bhatta. But then, just for the sake of students, let me very briefly tell how great he was and how the Vedas saved his life. Kumarila Bhatta once wanted to learn Buddhism because Buddhism was rampant and reached to its climax during the time of Kumarila Bhatta. When he approached a Buddhist school, the principal of the school denied entry to Kumarila Bhatta merely because he was a Hindu. He was a follower of the Vedas. Kumarila Bhatta returned back with a very sad face and then thought of some idea. So next what he did is, he completely shaved his head and wore a saffron cloth, appearing just like a Buddhist guy, and again approached the principal after some days. The principal happily admitted him into this school, thinking that he was a Buddhist of some sort. Kumarila Bhatta during his school days mastered all sects, all scriptures of Buddhism. And by the time he completed his studies in the Buddhist school, he was cut red-handed by the Buddhist teachers. And they said that you have cheated us. You are not a Buddhist, you are a Hindu, and therefore you are subject to punishment. And the Buddhist school decided that Kumarila Bhatta should be punished. And a severe punishment should be given to him so that no other Hindu should dare to do this kind of an act. Thinking thus, Kumarila Bhatta was taken to the topmost floor of the building, the Skry Rapa, the building, the highest place in the building, and it was decided to hurl him down from that top floor. Before throwing him down, the Buddhist asked, "Do you have a last wish?" Kumarila Bhatta said, "Yes, I do have. Please spare me a few minutes so that I can pray my Vedas, whom I have worshipped throughout my life with strong devotion and commitment." So he prayed to the Vedas that, "Oh my dear Vedas, oh my master, oh the ocean of knowledge, if I am a true follower of the Vedas, if I am really a devotee of the Vedas, if I followed you in true spirit, and if according to you I have not done anything wrong, but simply have sought knowledge, just for the sake of knowledge, I had entered into the Buddhist school, and I do not have any other malafide intention behind me, then definitely you will save me once I have been hurled down from this building." With this prayer, Kumarila Bhatta stopped, and then in the next moment, Kumarila Bhatta was hurled down from the top of that building to a completely stony surface existed pretty below in a forest kind of a location. And it was sure that if somebody was thrown down, hurled down, nobody should live further. Everyone was supposed to die. But to the utter surprise, after a few hours, Kumarila Bhatta got back to life. got back to consciousness, he found that there was absolutely nothing happened to him, even though he was hurled down from the top of the building. There he thanked the Vedic literature for such a powerful blessing which he received. This proves the greatness of the foundation of classical Indian philosophy, of Astika Darshanas, of Sadadarsana, that not only the reflection on the Vedas will lead us to the highest state of moksha, but by themselves they are more powerful. They can save the life of somebody. That's why I feel that certainly it is greatest, the great Vedas. The second point that I wish to outline here, because of which Indian philosophy is great, is the fact that the greatness of Indian philosophy lies in the emphasis on the self or spirit, not on the body. This is what is spirituality means, emphasizing spirit over body, over matter. To take an example of, again, the Vedic literature, Upanishadic literature, Astabhakra Muni, all of us know, once entered into the assembly of saints and who was invited by Raja Janak. Astabhakra means having so many, 8 bakras, 8 bands in his body. So the moment he enters into the assembly, all the saints gathered there laughed at looking at the Astabhakras, 8 bands of this Astabhakra Muni. They started laughing like anything. For a moment, Astabhakra Muni felt insulted, but then in the next moment, he again, giving a strong response to all the saints, laughed highly and much more loudly than the other saints laughed at him. When his laugh was much louder, when his laugh was much louder, other saints were surprised. And they started asking, why this guy, this Astabhakra, is laughing? We are simply laughing at him, looking at his 8 bands. But what happened to this guy? Why he is laughing? Has he gone mad or what? Then Raja Janaka was very silent. He was observing this phenomena. Raja Janaka asked, Sir, why you laughed? They were laughing at your 8 bands. But why you laughed? What is the reason? Muni Astabhakra replied by saying that, Dear Janaka, I had thought that you had an assembly of wise people, but then I find them completely foolish. They are not entitled to be called as saints or wise. Why? Because till now they haven't understood that there is a soul abiding in all of us. There is an Atman which is abiding in all of us, which is one and the same. The self is one and the same. The spirit is one and the same. They are not able to perceive this. What they have perceived, just like a materialist, they have perceived only on my body. They have considered my body to be myself. This is foolishness. So I am unhappy that I have attended, come to a place of, or an assembly of foolish. So the greatness lies here in spiritual dimension, emphasizing spirit, then the body, then the matter. Again, the greatness lies in crossing over sorrow or fear. The greatest fear is the fear of death. which can be overcome. Vedic literature tells us that fear is something, death fear is something which can be overcome. For example, we can take the great Nachiketa of Kathopanishad. Lord Yama time and again tells to Nachiketa that there are two ways. One is prayas, the other one is shreyas. If you take up prayas, the pleasurable path, then there is no end to suffering. But if you take up shreyas, then certainly you can end your suffering in this very life itself. Continuing his direction to Nachiketa, the king of death, Yama, tells that Utisthata Jagrata Prapya Varan Nivodata. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. This path of the Shreyas is just like a razor's edge, Kuras Shadhara. But don't worry, it can be traded. We can walk over by study and practice. Swami Vivekananda was a great fan of Nachiketa, which he has quoted often. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Utisthata Jagrata, Prapya Varana Nivodata. The self is described by Yamaraj here as Mahoto Mahiyan. Anor Aniyan, Mahoto Mahiyan. Such is the mystical entity called self. It is lower than the lowest. It is smaller than an atom, Anor Aniyan. But then, on the other hand, on the contrary, it is greater than the greatest, Mahoto Mahiyan. This can be realized in this very life if we follow the path of Shreyas. Another greatness of classical Indian philosophy is that the Indian philosophers, they appear from time to time to address and set right social ills through the establishment of philosophical ideas, philosophical ideals. And all of us know that the state of Hinduism used to face some turmoil. Therefore, a Buddha or a Shankara or Sri Chaitanya or Swami Vivekananda appeared, which we normally do not find in the Western phenomena. And most of the Indian philosophers, they became philosophers on account of the development of Vairagya in them. They have adapted to, they have retired to a life of a sannyasi, and wherein we find that they have developed and composed the sutras. Over and above this, Indian philosophers have established various schools and lineages of thought or traditions which centers around a particular philosophical idea and defend it like the West. For example, the school of Vedanta or the Dasanami Guru Parampara, like the Cartesian school, for instance. Another greatness of Indian philosophy, classical Indian philosophy, is that it has the Vada Vidhi system, the method of dialogue. For example, all of us know that once there was a dialogue between Sankara and Mandana Mishra over whether the Purva Mimamsa is superior or Uttara Mimamsa is superior. And again, all of us know that Mandana Mishra was lost to Shankaracharya, and his wife Ubhaya Bharati was also finally lost, as a result of which both of them became disciples of Shankara. This was the great tradition of dialogue or the Vada Vidhi, wherein a supreme view was, supreme philosophical ideal was set up, was established, and further it was followed by a tradition of disciples or a lineage or a school. Finally, before I come to the conclusion, to make my presentation quite relevant to the present day scenario is that all of us, we are now observing Azadi ki Amrit Mahotsav. Though we are all freed from the bondage of foreign rulers, still we are in the bondage of our very senses, mind, etc., who have been troubling us since time immemorial. We are not the senses. Certainly, we are not the senses. We are different from the senses. We regulate them. They shouldn't regulate us. The greatness of Vedic literature lies in the fact that they reveal us our own real identity. What is our real identity? Amritasya putra. So, unless such amritatva is attained, true or genuine azadi cannot be attained at all. Therefore, it is high time that we should ponder over this on the great occasion, on the auspicious occasion of Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav. Finally, the greatness of Indian culture consists in the call for attainment of peace, bliss, or ananda. All schools except the Charvakas unanimously aim at Atma Jnana, self-knowledge, which brings peace or bliss or ananda or shanti for humans, which is the goal of all life, for which the Upanishad says, it is that attaining which nothing remains to be attained. I repeat the last sentence of mine. The Upanishad says, Atma Jnana is that, Shanti is that, peace is that, bliss is that, attaining which nothing remains to be attained. This is the final statement of the Vedic literature, which is the foundation of classical Indian philosophy. With this, I stop my presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Maharana.
The organizer, Vikram College, for giving me an opportunity to have this, share my ideas with all of you. I am highly thankful to all of you. Thank you so much. Namaskar to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Maharana.
Sir.
You gave us a very sumptuous intellectual dish prepared in the land of Sangam. To begin with, you inquired about what is greatness about the great classical Indian tradition. You gave a battery of quotations from different thinkers to evidence your stand that indeed Indian tradition is very great. You began with A.L. Basram. I wonder that is India, but I think Basram's comments and observations are not very deep ones. They are not centered on Indian philosophical tradition. If I can have this quotation, this will be clear what I want to say. Mystics and sophists of all kinds roamed through the Ganga valley, all advocating some form of mental discipline and asceticism as a means to salvation. This is Basram's remark. But the age of the Buddha, when many of the best minds were abandoning their homes and professions for a life of asceticism. Look, what is the comment? Many of the best minds were abandoning their homes and professions for a life of asceticism. Was also a time of advance in commerce and politics. It produced not only philosophers and ascetics, but also merchant princes and men of actions. So his is a different view altogether, including, of course, philosophy and culture. But I think Max Muller, whom we did not quote, has a single line which extols the Indian tradition so much, that Vedic and Buddhistic literature opens to us a chapter in what has been called the education of the human race, to which we can find no parallel anywhere else. You see the profundity of his remark. Anyway, you did very well to establish the fact that Indian tradition is indeed great. You gave glimpses of some great features of it. You told about Shreya and Prayer distinction, then Bhava Vidhi system. Then at the end, you told something which really made us happy. This Amrita Mahotsav celebration indeed draws its inspiration from the conception that we are all Amrutasya Putras. In the Mundaka Upanishad, it has been said that all the creations are from Ananda. They are nurtured in Ananda and they get extinguished in Ananda. That is very good, really.
Sir.
But the problem is, greatness being the Indian tradition, how to preserve it, how to carry it for the next generation. That is the problem. And you did well, very much citing the works of Motilal Mohanty, who have worked very hard in getting our things available to the Western audience for our benefit and for their benefit also. You did not cite many of other thinkers like Arindam Chakravarti and Billy Muria, who have done immense task in popularizing Indian philosophy, in critically and analytically presenting them. And our own persons, Professor Dayakrishna, Professor Pahi, Professor Barlinge, Professor Mullati, Professor Ganeshwar Mishra and his students, including myself, we have omitted all these persons, but
Right,
they
sir.
have done their bit in order to bring Indian philosophical tradition to the forefront of today's audience. Actually, the problem is how to engage these philosophical traditions and how to engage the present students and researchers in that project. That is the main problem. Actually, our students, they are not very much interested in classical Indian philosophical tradition. They pick up some easy topics, thinking that they're very much relevant, very much popular. And they are not very much in that hoary tradition called Indian philosophy.
Sir.
There are a few questions in the chat box.
Okay, sir.
One big question by Dr. Om Naran Rao. It is this.
Sir.
The big question is, I am not able to understand as to why did some of the great Indian thinkers try to compare classical Indian philosophy as nothing less than its Western counterpart when the former has a distinct identity. Distinct identity, much non-understanding of the West. How does the sentence complete? I don't know. Further, some of the great philosophers of the West have tried to put the Indian line of thinking, of course with certain modifications, as a new brand of philosophy which actually is basically Indian. How do you see this, sir? It is not actually this. How do you see these? There are two, three things. You please attend to that and have your response.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. Look, when I said that that some Indian philosophers have tried to compare classical Indian philosophy with their Western counterpart. Why? Why this comparison came up? This comparison came up towards the mostly second part of the 20th century, because of the attitudes of Westerners about Indian thought. I've quoted some of the observations made by Professor Radhakrishnan and by K. Sachidananda Murthy, wherein it was said that Indian philosophy is without logic. It is a kind of mysticism. It is a worship of Shakti, the goddess. It is a worship of the sexual energy, and many other misleading words they've used to shatter Indian philosophy, to reject Indian philosophy by further saying that Indian philosophy is no philosophy at all.
Right.
They have gone to the extent of some of them have gone to the extent of saying that it is sort of black magic also. Now, to clarify all these positions and to make Indian philosophy straightforward as it is, without making any manipulation in its thesis, the Indian philosophers have tried to compare Indian philosophy with that of Western concepts. And they have tried to prove that here in Indian philosophy, classical Indian philosophy, we have also those concepts. We have those problems, and solutions have been offered in a rational way, in a justifiable way. Therefore, classical Indian philosophy is not a kind of mysticism, or it is not baseless, it is not illogical. It has a strong
It is not life
grounding.
negative. It is not, it is not
Yeah.
life negative also.
It's not like life negative. Rather, it is optimistic in nature. We misunderstand it.
It was their allegation.
Yeah, the misconceptions are there saying that it is completely pessimistic. No, it's not pessimistic at all. It is optimism. It is leading towards optimism. So that is the reason why it forced the contemporary Indian philosophers like K.C. Bhattacharya and many Jain Mohanty, including himself, and then B.K. Matilal and many others. They have attempted to reply, to give a strong reply to the Westerners, saying that here in East, in the Orient, we have a philosophy which is not unlike yours. That's it.
That is another part.
Yeah, what is that?
Further, some of the great philosophers of the West have tried to put the Indian line of thinking, of course with certain modifications, as a new brand of philosophy, which actually is basically Indian.
But then we don't have. No, sir. No, actually, we do not have. We may find some similarities. We may find, for example, Heraclitus, propounding the doctrine of flux. We'll say that, okay, Buddha has also said it like this. We may have similarities, but
ଯେମିତି କାଲି କଥା ପଡିଥିଲା କ୍ରୋସେ ଯୋଉ କଥା କହିଲେ ସେଇ କଥାଟା ଇଣ୍ଡିଆରୁ ନେଇଯାଇଛନ୍ତି, ବ୍ରାଡଲେ ଯୋଉ କଥା କହିଲେ ଗଣେଶ ମିଶ୍ର କହୁଛନ୍ତି ସିଏ ଶଙ୍କରରୁ ନେଇଯାଇଛନ୍ତି, ଏଇ ସବୁ କଥା ସେମାନେ କାହିଁ କଲେ?
କିନ୍ତୁ ସାର୍ ଆମର ଆମର କିଛି ଏଭିଡେନ୍ସ ଅଛି ଆମ ପାଖରେ କି? ଆମ ପାଖରେ ତ କିଛି ଏଭିଡେନ୍ସ ନାହିଁ ଯେ ଆମଠୁ ନେଇକି ଆମ କଥା ନାହିଁ ସେମାନେ।
ନା ଏଭିଡେନ୍ସ ଅଛି ସେମାନେ ନେଇଛନ୍ତି ବୋଲି। ସେମାନେ କାହିଁକି ନେଲେ ସେ କଥା ତାଙ୍କୁ ଭଲ ଲାଗିଲା ନେଲେ।
So again it is our credit.
That is also our credit.
Yeah, that is our credit. If they take, but then they have to acknowledge us, no sir.
ସେମାନେ acknowledge କଲେନି, ସେଟା ତାଙ୍କ ଦୋଷ ହେଲା। ସେମାନେ ଦୋଷ କାହିଁକି କଲେ? ସେମାନେ ଦୋଷ କାହିଁକି କଲେ ସେଟା ବି କଣ କରିବୁ? କଣ ଗୋଟେ ଇଣ୍ଟରନ୍ୟାସନାଲ କୋର୍ଟ ଅଫ ଜଷ୍ଟିସ ରେ ପଡି ପାରିବ ଏଟା?
Plagiarism sir lagla tanko. Okay. So
Then
this way.
another question is there.
Yeah. Hmm.
Why is knowing and seeing called darsana in Indian philosophy? Are both the things are the same?
Why is knowing and seeing darsana are both things the same? Yes. The moment we know, we see it. Knowing and seeing, they coincide actually. They coincide. The moment I see, I know. And if I say that I know, I have seen it. So they take place simultaneously, which is called as darsana. We can say that both of them are same. No doubt about this.
ନା ରଘୁନାଥ ପ୍ରଧାନ ପଚାରିଛନ୍ତି ଏ ପ୍ରଶ୍ନଟି
sir.
ରଘୁନାଥ ପ୍ରଧାନ ଯଦି ଥାଆନ୍ତି ପ୍ରକୃତରେ କଣ ତାଙ୍କ ମନରେ ଅଛି କହିପାରନ୍ତି ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ
Sir.
ଓଡିଆ ହଉ କି ଇଂଲିଶ ହଉ କହିପାରନ୍ତି କାହିଁକିନା ଏଠି କ୍ଲିୟର ହଉନି ସେ କଣ ପଚାରୁଛନ୍ତି ରଘୁନାଥ ପ୍ରଧାନ
Hello. Raghunath Pradhan. Raghunath Pradhan. ପଡିଗଲା ପଚାର
Yes, sir.
ହଁ ପଚାର
କଣ କହିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଥିଲେ ଏକ୍ଜାକ୍ଟଲି କ୍ଲିୟର ହଉନି ଏଥିରେ ନୋଇଂ କଥାଟା କୋଉଠୁ ଆସିଲା ଯଦି ଫିଲୋସଫି କଥା କୁହାଯାଏ ଫିଲୋସଫି ହଉଛି ତ ଲଭ୍ ଅଫ୍ ୱିଜଡମ୍ ଏବଂ ଦର୍ଶନ କଥା ଯଦି ହେଲା ଦୃଶ୍ୟତେ ଅନେନ ଇତି ଦର୍ଶନ ଏଇଠି ଦର୍ଶନ କଥାରେ ଆସିପାରେ ସିଂ କଥା ଯୋଉ କହୁଛ ସେଠି ତ ନୋଇଂ କଥା ଅଛି ଏଠି ୱିଜଡମ୍ କଥା ଆସିଛି ତମେ କଣ ପଚାରିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛ ଏକ୍ଜାକ୍ଟଲି ଟିକେ କହିଦିଅ ତ
କଣ କହିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛ ରଘୁନାଥ
ରଘୁନାଥ ଅଛ ପୁରା ହ୍ୟାଲୋ
ଏ କହୁନ
ହଁ କୁହ ରଘୁନାଥ କୁହ
ଏ କାହାର କିଏ କେହି ଦେଖୁନାହାନ୍ତି ମ ତମେ ଯାହାକୁ କହୁଛ ସିଏ ଯାଇ କୋଉଠି ଛାଇ ଦେଖାଯାଉଛି ତାର ସିଏ ଏଠି ନାହିଁ ତମେ କିଛି ଡରିବାର ନାହିଁ କିଛି ଛାଇକୁ କାହିଁକି ଡର ଯେ
ଏ ରଘୁନାଥ ଡରୁଛୁ କାହିଁକି ପଚାରେ ଯେ ତୁ ଯାହା ପଚାରୁଛୁ ନୋଇଂ ଆଉ ସିଂ କଥା କଣ ଏକ୍ଜାକ୍ଟଲି କଣ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛୁ କହ
ସାର୍ ସେ ମୋର ଯୋଉ ସେଇଂ ଆଉ ନୋଇଂ ବିଷୟରେ ମାନେ ତାଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ବୋଥ ଦି ଜଣ ଯୋଉ ଇଏ ଅଛି ସେ ବିଷୟ ଟିକେ କୁହନ୍ତୁ
କିଏ ଅଛି
କଣ ହେଲାନି ତଥାପି କ୍ଲିୟର ହେଲାନି ଆଉ ଥରେ କହ ଭଲ ଟିକେ ରଘୁନାଥ କହ
ସାର୍ ନେକ୍ସଟ କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ କୁ ଯିବ
ସାର୍ ଯୋଉ ନୋଇଂ ଆଣ୍ଡ ସିଂ
ନୋଇଂ କୋଉଠୁ ଆଣିଲୁ ନୋଇଂ କୋଉଠୁ ଆଣିଲୁ ନୋଇଂ କଥାଟା କଣ ନୋଇଂ କଥାଟା କୋଉଠୁ ଆଣିଲୁ ଯେ କଣ ନୋଇଂ କଥା
sir let me clarify knowing is not called as darsana raghunatha knowing is not called as darsana okay darsana means seeing or vision of reality vision of the truth vision of the self vision of the reality knowing means jnana or knowledge okay so these two are completely different darshana is related only with seeing not with knowing but then at the level of the highest state we say that knowing and seeing they coincide they converge so there is a kind of union or interwoven between knowing and seeing how because the moment I see the reality I say that I know it and once I say that I know it that means I have already seen it so seeing and knowing they go together go hand in hand at the final stage of let us say realization or samadhi or maybe atma sakshatakar or brahma sakshatkar so both are same from this point of view
thank you ଧବଳେଶ୍ୱର ଅଛ କି ଧବଳେଶ୍ୱର ନାୟକ
let us move to the next question
ଧବଳେଶ୍ୱର ଅଛ ଧବଳେଶ୍ୱର asks one question
yes
why
sir.
are the concepts of pure reason and nous not found in Indian philosophy ଆଚ୍ଛା ଧବଳେଶ୍ୱର ଏ ନାଉସ୍ କଥାଟା କୋଉଠି ଅଛି
what are the concepts of
ନାଉସ୍ ଟା କୋଉ ଭାଷାରେ ଇଂଲିଶ ଭାଷା ନାଉସ୍ ଟା ଧବଳେଶ୍ୱର ନାଉସ୍ ଇଂଲିଶରେ ନା କଣ?
କୁଆଡେ
ଆଉ
ଗଲାଣି?
ତାପରେ ପଚାରିବ ବ୍ରାଡଲେ କାହିଁକି ଆତ୍ମନ ବିଷୟରେ କାହିଁ ଡିସ୍କସନ କଲେନି ତ?
କଲେନି।
ଗୋଟେ କି ପ୍ରକାର ପ୍ରଶ୍ନ ମୁଁ କେହି ବୁଝିପାରୁନି ଆଗ।
What the concern? What the concept?
ଆଚ୍ଛା, there is another question.
Okay, sir.
What is relation between Vijnanavada and Prasannavada? No, sorry. What is Vinayavada and Prasannavada?
Vijnanavada and Prasad.
No, Vinayavada. What is Vinayavada and what is Prasannavada? ये बादवान से कौन कहती है?
सर विज्ञानवाद एंड प्रसन्नवाद सर
ଲକ୍ଷଣ ବୋଧେ ସାର୍ ପଢେଇଛି କଣ ଏଗୁଡା ସବୁ ପିଲାଙ୍କୁ।
ବିଜ୍ଞାନବାଦ ହେଲେ ପ୍ରସନ୍ନବାଦ ପୁଣି କୋଉଟା?
ମୁଁ ପଢେଇନି ଏଇଗୁଡା ନେଟ
ପ୍ରସନ୍ନବାଦ କୋଉଠି ଥିଲା? କୋଉଠି ପାଇଲୁ କୋଉଠି ସେ କନସେପ୍ଟଟା? ଆମେ ନ ଜାଣିଥିଲେ ଖୋଜିବା, ସାଙ୍ଗ ହେଇକି ଖୋଜିବା, କନସେପ୍ଟଟା କୋଉଠି ପାଇଲୁ?
ନ୍ୟୁ
ବିଜ୍ଞାନବାଦ
ଡିସ୍କଭରି
ଠିକ
ସାର୍।
ଅଛି, ବିଜ୍ଞାନବାଦ ପଚାରିଲି, ବିଜ୍ଞାନବାଦ ଠିକ ଅଛି, ପ୍ରସନ୍ନବାଦ କଣ?
କୋଉଠୁ ଆଇଛୁ? ଏଇଟା ନୟାଗଡ଼ରୁ ଆଣିଛୁ ନା ତୁ
ନାଇଁ ସେ ବୁଦ୍ଧିଜିମ କୋଉଠି ଦେଖିଛି? ନୟାଗଡ଼ ନୁହେଁ ଯେ, ସେ ପ୍ରସନ୍ନ ପଦା ବୁଦ୍ଧିଷ୍ଟ କନସେପ୍ଟରୁ ସେଇଠୁ ସେ ନେଇକି ପ୍ରସନ୍ନବାଦ କରିଦେଲା।
Oh my God. sir. Next question. Sir, ଆଉ କଣ question ଅଛି?
Sir.
ଆଉ ଏଠି କିଛି ନାହିଁ। ଆଉ ଯଦି କିଏ ପଚାର, ଆଚ୍ଛା ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ଅଛି। Is Indian philosophy all about Hinduism? Is Indian philosophy practical in our life?
Is Indian philosophy? Yeah, let me respond to the first question. Yes. Priti Swai, nice question. Indian philosophy is not about Hinduism. Had it been only for Hindus, then the non-Hindus, for example, Buddhists are not considered as Hindus. The Jainas are also not considered as Hindus. The Charvakas are also not considered as Hindus. So therefore, Indian philosophy is not confined to the reason of the Hindus. It is pretty broad. We have a place for the materialist as well as a non-materialist. We have a place for the Nastikas as well as the Astikas. So that is the reason why it may be some people call it as a Hindu philosophy, because it is confined to the geographical boundary of the Hindustan. That's a different issue. But then Indian philosophy itself is quite broad in its outlook. It is a place for all kinds of thinking, all kinds of reflections, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, etc. So that is the reason why Hinduism is not all about, Indian philosophy is not all about Hinduism. Second question is Indian philosophy practical in our life? Certainly it is practical in our life. Its specification, its most important feature is that it is practical in our life. It is not theoretical like the Western ones. From the very beginning of the Vedas, the philosophers of India, they have shown the path of moksha, liberation, or freedom from suffering. Whether you are a Nastika, except the Charvakas, whether you are a Nastika or you are a Astika, the ultimate goal is the practical affair of man, that how should we get rid of suffering. And all of them have shown way to be very practical, to cross over suffering. So that is why it is practical. Sir.
Another question is Subhas Modak.
Sir, Srinivas Krishnan sir is asking something.
Let Subhas Modak come first. Srinivasan is after that.
Okay, after that. Okay, fine, sir. Subhas Modak. What does it say? Materialism,
mainly Padartha, is also discussed along with spirituality in Indian philosophy. But why do you call Indian philosophy is a philosophy of spirituality? Padarthas
Yes.
are
Okay.
discussed also.
Okay. See, as I just told now, Indian philosophy is very broad in its outlook. So we have given the materialist a room. But that doesn't mean that the rest of the philosophies, Buddhist, the Jaina philosophy, and then Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Mimamsa, and Vedanta, these eight systems are highly spiritual in nature. Materialism we have given a place, but then majority of the schools, they prefer spiritualism over materialism. That's why we say mostly Indian philosophy is spiritual and practical in its approach. And that is its speciality. If you remove spirituality from Indian philosophy, then Indian philosophy becomes no philosophy at all. It would become as good as the materialism of the Charvakas.
Okay, thank you. The
Sir.
next question is by Srinivas
Srinivas.
Krishnamurthy.
Yes, sir. I will just, sir.
Yeah.
Professor, sir, thank you very much for your excellent elaborative discussion on Indian classical philosophy. I am indeed thankful to you. But I failed to understand that he spoke of the Azad ke Amrit Mahotsav, he said, no?
Yes, sir. Amrit.
Mahotsav.
Okay.
Please tell me exactly, even after 75 years of independence, have we reached that stage of speaking Indian classical philosophy only in other languages and not in English? And because of that, there is a lot of misinterpretation with the rationalistic ideas of the Westerners, which put us in a very quandary position. And what is your take on that? I think the Russian philosophy, the Japanese philosophy, the Chinese philosophies are all in their own languages, whereas Indian classical philosophy is not taught in the academic curriculum, either in Hindi or Sanskrit or Oriya or Maharashtra or Tamil or Telugu or Malayalam. How do you react to this?
Who says it is not there? Who says it is not there?
Yeah,
Sir?
of course.
We have it here. Who says it is not there?
No, in most of the, colleges, I can say that
In
even
vernacular.
That you can say, but you cannot have a generalization like this.
Sir?
You cannot have a generalization like this that nowhere it is done. It is only done in English.
That is what is my contention.
History of Indian philosophy has been written in Hindi. One is there by
Sir, I accept all you say, Mr. Professor Ganesh Prasad.
It is written in Odia. It is written in Odia.
But it is not, taught in the curriculum. That is what in the
curriculum. It is in the curriculum. Up to undergraduate stage, we teach in regional language. That is optional also.
Then why our Professor Surya Maharana has been deliberating only in English for the last 2 hours?
Huh?
No, true, sir. I
had he talked in Odia, could you have understood it?
No, that we have to. Make the people to understand and reveal it. If I speak in Tamil, only we have to understand.
Day before yesterday, I was speaking Odia, and the people complained that you speak in English. We are not able to understand.
Yes, sir.
We take it for granted that we are not focusing our attention on regional languages. That is the problem.
But anyway, sir, Professor Srinivasan, sir, it is high time now. See.
Any other question? There is no problem regarding language.
Yeah, no problem. And it is high time that in the new education policy, languages are now emphasized. In vernacular languages, we can have our own education. So your problem is going to be solved very soon, sir.
Very, very kind of you and excellent. That is what I expected. Because we can avoid this Westerners' interpretation in the wrong way about our Indian classical philosophy. That is my
Sir, Srinivas, sir, there was a time when we had only one language, that is Sanskrit. We used to converse, we have to write in Sanskrit only. And if anybody is interested to argue with me or want to defeat me or want to have a dialogue with me, she or he must know Sanskrit first and must go through all the scriptures.
Yes, exactly.
And this is what the tradition. But then in due course of time, we have seen that so many things happened, and because of which, and again, the English language
In
dominated
course
in the
of time, we have already passed 75 years, sir,
yeah,
after
yeah.
independence.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And let us be optimistic, sir. Now, this new education policy.
Dr. Maharana, another question is there.
Sir, okay, sir.
Okay.
What are
Thank
the
you.
main ideas of Indian
Well,
philosophy?
yes,
What are
sir.
the main ideas of Indian philosophy?
What are the main ideas of Indian philosophy?
Hmm.
One main idea of Indian philosophy is that we have to get rid of sorrow, pain, and suffering, because sarvam dukkham, everywhere there is dukkha, and therefore we have to get rid of this dukkha. This is one idea, and the most important idea. Second idea is that the ultimate goal of life, the ultimate goal of life has been described in different terminologies in different systems. Some say that it is a nirvana, some say that it is a mukti, some say it is a moksha, some say it is kaivalya. So this higher state has to be attained here in this very human life itself. Because once we leave this human life, once this human life is gone, the next life of a human life is not guaranteed, is not sure. So therefore, this human life which has been given to us is very, very precious, very, 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 very useful, and we must utilize every second of this life for our own upliftment towards the highest goal of life. These are the two main ideas of Indian philosophy.
That is it. But to supplement your clarification,
Sir.
Acharya S.N.Dasgupta, in his History of Indian Philosophy, lays down three fundamental points which are held as chief ideas of Indian philosophy. Number one is the karma theory. Number two, the doctrine of mukti. And number three, the doctrine of soul. These three ideas are regarded by him as the main ideas of Indian philosophy. And he says that there are certain shared beliefs. Number one, pessimistic attitude towards the world and optimism at the end. Number two, ethical conduct for attainment of salvation. So these are shared ideas of all the systems of Indian philosophy, according to S.N.Dasgupta.
Okay, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, okay, sir.
And moreover, at the end, there is no question to answer now. At the end,
Sir.
I would like to say that S.N.Dasgupta is not a ordinary historian of Indian philosophy. I have tried to depict how excellent his achievements are.
Sir.
But now I can say that how critical he is in his outlook. He says, Indian philosophy, in spite of its magnificent outlook, thoroughness of logical dialectic, its high appreciation of moral and religious values, is closed all round by four walls of unproved dogmas. Number one, the dogma of the infallibility of the Vedic wisdom. Number two, the dogma of emancipation and bondage. Number three, the dogma of the law of karma. And number four, the dogma of rebirth. This is S.N.Dasgupta again.
Sir.
And this is well for critical examination and food for further thought.
Sir.
So with this,
Definitely, sir.
I thank you, Dr. Maharana, once again for your beautiful, long, and elaborate and clear discussion of the topic.
Sir, could I say something? I won't take much time.
Pragya, please.
Professor Maharana,
No,
I'll
in
always
fact,
make it a point to attend your lectures. It was so enriching, and thank you for sharing such valuable sources.
Okay, I was looking for you. That where is Pragya? Maybe some busy schedule or something like that. She has not been appearing. I was about to ask sir about you, but then very, very longly for you. You appeared immediately. Okay, please go ahead, Pragya.
Actually, a student asked the question that is there any difference or knowing or seeing or something like that. The question was, what was the question? Knowing and seeing? Darshana. He asked about darshana. So the meaning
Yeah,
of darshana
knowing
is
and
seeing.
knowing and seeing. Why
Yes.
knowing and seeing are called as darsana? This is the question actually.
Okay. I just wanted to say something here that darshana means vision of truth. Uh, to have
True.
a vision of truth means to understand or to know the truth. It's not ordinary sense perception that we cannot
True.
use the word seeing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And that is one thing. And another thing is you narrated the story of Kumarila Bhatta. My question is, the Buddhists who are the stern believers in non-violence, how could they commit such an act of violence?
This is, this is the reason why the Buddhists were thrown out of India, and Adi Sankaracharya has to take birth just to smash the, such kind of Buddhists who practice non-violence, practice violence against the Buddhist teaching of non-violence. So this was the, last step. The last thing that the Buddhists do is, hurling down Kumarila Bhatta. So somehow again the story goes on. I somehow I stopped in between. The story goes on again.
This is a
Yeah.
story. How far that is true, we do not know.
No,
But
no,
this
but
is
sir,
to,
sir,
this is the evidence, the point. This is the evidence, a point, a particular point. There are many such stories. How far they are true, we do not know.
sir, this I have quoted from Sankara Digvijayam, sir. Sankara Digvijayam, written by one of his disciples. Shankara's disciples has written it, and it is in Sanskrit and then translated in English as well. Sir, it is available online as well, sir. Online available.
बहुत मिथ ତିଆରି ହଉଛି କଣ ସେ ଗୋଟେ ମିଥ
ନାଇଁ ମିଥ sir ନାଇଁ ଏଟା ନାଇଁ sir
ବହୁତ ଭାକ୍ତିକ ମିଥ୍ୟା ଅଛି ମୁଁ ବୁଝିଲ ନା ବହୁତ ଭାକ୍ତିକ ମିଥ୍ୟା ଅଛି ପୁରାଣ ମାନଙ୍କରେ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି ହେଇକି ରହିଛି ଶାସ୍ତ୍ର ମାନଙ୍କରେ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି ହେଇକି ରହିଛି
କିନ୍ତୁ sir ଏଟା ଶଙ୍କର ଦିଗ୍ବିଜୟ ଟା widely accepted sir, widely accepted
ହେଲା ଯେ ତାକୁ ଆସଚ ନବା କି କିପରି ଭାବରେ ନବା ରେଟୋରିକାଲି ପୁଟ୍ କରାଯାଇଛି ତାକୁ କେମିତି ବୁଝିଲେ ହବ ଏଇଟା ଦେଖିବାନି
ସେଟା sir ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ଭାବେ ଦେଖିବା but then
ଏଟା ତ ହିଷ୍ଟୋରିକାଲ ଡକ୍ୟୁମେଣ୍ଟ ସାର୍ ଧରିଲେ ସେ ଅଲଗା କଥା ସେଟା ହିଷ୍ଟୋରିକାଲ ଡକ୍ୟୁମେଣ୍ଟ ସାର୍ ନିଆଯାଇ ପାରିବ କି
ନାଇଁ ଗୋଟେ ଦଳ ସାର୍ ମାନେ ଯୋଉ ସାଉଦର୍ନ ଦଳ ଅଛନ୍ତି ସେମାନେ ସାଉଦର୍ନ ବାଲା କହୁଛନ୍ତି ହଁ ଏଟା ତ ଅଥେଣ୍ଟିକ ଏଟାକୁ ନିଆଯିବ ବିବେକ ଚୂଡାମଣିଟାକୁ ନର୍ଥ ରେ ଏତେ ରିକଗ୍ନିସନ ଦିଆ ହଉନି କିନ୍ତୁ ସାଉଥ ରେ ପୁରା ଦିଆ ହଉଛି
ସେଟା ଶଙ୍କର ଲେଖିନାହାନ୍ତି ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଉଛି
ହଁ ଶଙ୍କର ଲେଖିନାହାନ୍ତି ବୋଲି କୁହାଯାଉଛି କିନ୍ତୁ ସାଉଥ ରେ ତ ସେଟା ଗୋଟେ ମ୍ୟାଗ୍ନମ୍ ଏପସ୍ ଶଙ୍କରାଚାର୍ଯ୍ୟ ମାନେ ବିବେକ ଚୂଡାମଣି ବ୍ରହ୍ମସୂତ୍ର ଭାଷ୍ୟ ପରେ ବିବେକ ଚୂଡାମଣି ଆସୁଛି
ବାଦେ ନ ଯାୟତେ ତର୍କ ବୁଦ୍ଧି
ତତ୍ତ୍ୱ ଜ୍ଞାନ ଆଜ୍ଞା
ତତ୍ତ୍ୱବୋଧ
Pragya, nice to have your question.
So I thank
today satisfy you. Yeah.
I thank all the persons
Okay, all right.
who
All right.
asked
Sir,
questions and interacted with
okay, thank you all the best.
Dr. Maharana. And Dr. Maharana gave nice responses to all the questions. I thank him once again and request you to be amongst us whenever we need your erudition.
Definitely, sir. I cannot say no. I am always there at your feet.
Thank you. I thank Lakshmana and Francis for inviting me to be in the chair this afternoon also. This afternoon has turned into late evening. I offer the microphone to Lakshmana to do the rest of the ritual. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Pranam, sir.
Thank
Sir,
you,
pranam.
Thank you, sir. Respected Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, Chairperson of this session, the speaker, Professor Tapan, and the co-speaker, Professor Surya Maharana, sir. It seems to be a great honor to propose a formal vote of thanks to all who have helped us in making this seminar a very resounding success, particularly today. First of all, I would like to give my hearty gratitude my guide, my teacher, Professor Ganesh Prasad Das, for his a wonderful chairing this session, and he cleared all the doubts by the students. I would also like thank to our distinguished speaker, both the speaker, Professor Tapan and Professor Sujanta Maharana for their thought-provoking speech in this seminar. I also thanks to our principal and all the staff members of my department, my dear students, for his patience hearing, and all the participants. I also express my heartfelt gratitude to all the participants, and hope tomorrow we will meet again in the same time. Tomorrow is our last session for this webinar series. Hope we will rejoin again for the tomorrow activity. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, namaskar. Thank you, namaskar. Pranam.
ଲଖଣ ଚା ଫା କିଛି ମିଳିବନି କି?
ସେଇ କଥା ମୁଁ କାଲି କହିଥିଲି, ସେ ଖାଲି କପ୍ ଟା ଆଣି ଥୋଉନି କାହିଁକି ସେ କ୍ୟାମେରା ଆଗରେ?
ଏଇ ଅଛି, ପଠେଇଦେବି। ଆଉ ଯାଉ କରୋନା actually କରୋନା ବହୁତ କିଛି
ସମସ୍ତେ ଦେଖିଥାନ୍ତି ନା, ପଠେଇଦେବୁ ପୁଣି 1-to-1 ଆଫେୟାର ହେଇଯିବ।
କରୋନା ଆମକୁ ବହୁତ ମାନେ ଶିଖେଇ ଦେଇଛି ଯେ ଯୋଉ ଫିଜିକାଲ ନହେଲେ ମଧ୍ୟ ଆମେ କ୍ଲାଉଡ ଚାମ୍ବରରେ ଆମେ ଏକତ୍ରିତ ହେଇପାରୁଛନ୍ତି। ନିହାତି ଆଉ ବର୍ଷ ଯାଉ କିମ୍ବା ଏ ବର୍ଷ ହୁଏତ ନର୍ମାଲ ହେଇଗଲେ ଫିଜିକାଲି ଆଉ ଥରେ କରିବା ଗୋଟେ ନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ସେମିନାର, ଫେର ଦେଖାହବା, କିଛି ଅସୁବିଧା ନାହିଁ।
କିନ୍ତୁ କରୋନା ତ ଗୋଟେ ବଢିଆ କଥା ଶିଖେଇ ଦେଲା ଯେ କମ ପଇସାରେ କମ କଷ୍ଟରେ ବହୁତ ବଡ ବଡ କଥା କରିହବ। କେତେ କମ ପଇସାରେ କିଛି କୁଆଡେ ଯିବା ଆସିବାର ନାହିଁ, ଗୋଡ ହାତ ଦରଜ ହବାର ନାହିଁ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଏକାଡେମିକ୍ସ ତ କିଛି କମ ହଉନି, ଉନ୍ନତ ହଉନି।
ନା ଉନ୍ନତ ଠିକ ଚାଲିଛି। ହଁ, ଆଉ ତାଠୁ ବରଂ ବେଟର ଚାଲିଛି ଆହୁରି।
କମ ଫାଇନାନ୍ସିଆଲ ରେ ବହୁତ କିଛି ମାନେ ହେଇପାରୁଛି। ICPR 30,000 ରେ ଆମେ କରିଥିଲେ ଜଣେ ଦି ଜଣ ମାନେ ଓଡିଶା ଭିତରେ ଓଡିଶା ହିଁ ଆମେ ଆରେଞ୍ଜ କରିପାରିବା, ତାଠୁ ଅଧିକ ନୁହଁ। କିନ୍ତୁ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଆମେ 8 ଲେକ୍ଚର ସେଇ ଆମାଉଣ୍ଟ ରେ କରିପାରୁଛନ୍ତି।
ICPR ମୁଁ ସେଇଆ ବି କହିଥିଲି, ମୁଁ କହିଲି କମ ପଇସା ଦେଇକି ବେଶୀ ସେମିନାର ଏମିତି ହୁଏତ କେବଳ ଭର୍ଚୁଆଲ ମୋଡ ନହେଲେ ଡୁଆଲ ମୋଡ ରେ କରନ୍ତୁ।
ନାଇଁ ସାର୍, ଆପଣଙ୍କ ସଜେସନ ଟା ବହୁତ ମାନେ କାର୍ଯ୍ୟକାରୀ ହେଇଛି ଏବଂ ବହୁତ ବଢିଆ ସାର୍ ସଜେସନ ଆପଣଙ୍କର, ନିଶ୍ଚିତ ଭାବେ ବହୁତ ବଢିଆ ଏବଂ ସମସ୍ତେ ବେନିଫିଟେଡ ବି ହେଲେ। ଆଉ ଗୁଡାଏ ଲେକ୍ଚର ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ଆପଣଙ୍କର ଅବଜରଭେସନ ଗୁଡାକ ବି ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କୁ ଆମକୁ ଶୁଣିବାକୁ ମିଳୁଛି, ନୋଟ କରୁଛୁ ସେଗୁଡା ସବୁ। ତ ଗ୍ରେଟ୍ ସାର୍, ଗ୍ରେଟ୍।
Thank you very much. Hope to see you again the same time tomorrow.
Okay, thank you sir. Pranam sir.
Thank you sir.
Thank you Lakhan. Thank you Balram. Thank you everyone. Thank you all.